Imagine driving down a deserted road in Canada where civilization becomes a whisper and the forest swallows all sound. Suddenly, a barefoot young woman emerges from the woods. She doesn't speak your language. Her clothes are made of animal skins, and she looks as if she hasn't seen another person in decades. For the police, this was the first clue to an unimaginable horror. The woman, pale and skeletal, stumbled onto a remote logging road in northern British Columbia. Her feet were bare, bloodied by the unforgiving terrain. Her eyes, wide with a terror that seemed ancient and deep-rooted, didn't seem to comprehend the truck that screeched to a halt before her. The driver, a man accustomed to the solitude of the woods, would later tell the police he had never seen such pure fear. In an era of digital footprints and constant connection, she was a ghost. A person with no name, no records, no history. The initial medical examination revealed a chilling narrative written on her body: old fractures that had healed incorrectly, signs of severe and prolonged malnutrition, and a vitamin D deficiency so profound it was a miracle her bones hadn't disintegrated. This wasn't someone who had been lost for a few weeks. This was a lifetime of isolation and suffering. The discovery raised a disturbing question that chilled authorities to the bone. If she had spent her entire life hidden, who had hidden her? And more terrifyingly, was she the only one? The mystery of the forest Jane Doe began not with a crime scene, but with a survivor, a single fragile clue to a darkness that had festered, unseen and unheard, for generations. The initial investigation was a journey into the void. The young woman, whom doctors tentatively named Lyra, was a blank slate. Her fingerprints matched nothing. There were no dental records. Her DNA was run against every database, from criminal records to ancestry sites, and returned no hits. It was as if she had been born directly into the forest. Her language was the first major hurdle. Linguists were brought in, struggling to decipher her mix of archaic, broken English and a unique familial dialect, a private language developed over years of total isolation. Slowly, through drawings and word association, a terrifying picture began to form. She drew a cabin, but it looked more like a fortress. She drew a tall, bearded man with dark, domineering eyes, a figure she associated with the words for father and fear. And she drew other figures, smaller, always huddled together. It confirmed the investigators' worst fears. She wasn't alone out there. The search began in earnest, a massive operation in a wilderness that spanned thousands of square kilometers of dense, nearly impenetrable forest. For days, the search turned up nothing. Helicopters saw nothing but an endless canopy of green and black. How do you find a family that didn't want to be found? The answer would come from a source no one expected. After nearly a week of fruitless searching, the breakthrough came from an old, semi-retired bush pilot. He remembered a strange plume of smoke he used to see years ago in an officially uninhabited sector. He had dismissed it at the time, figuring it was a squatter or a prospector, common enough in the area. But the location was far from any known trail or waterway. Guided by his memory, a police helicopter flew over the area, and this time they saw it. Not smoke, but the glint of light reflecting off something that shouldn't have been there. A small camouflaged tarp. Descending on foot, the tactical team followed a nearly imperceptible trail, designed to be invisible from above. What they found was a nightmare realized. It was a compound, not a cabin, built into the side of a rocky hill, surrounded by a formidable palisade of sharpened logs. It was a prison. When the officers breached the gate, they were met with an eerie silence. The man Lyra had drawn stood on the porch, an imposing figure with a wild, graying beard and the unwavering, defiant eyes of a zealot. This was Leland Blackwood. He offered no resistance, only a cold, disdainful look as he was taken into custody. Inside the dark, full-smelling cabin, they found the others. His wife, Elara, a woman who looked decades older than her 50 years, and 4 other children. They were pale, thin, and moved with the same fearful, haunted quality as Lyra. The compound was a testament to one man's absolute control. There were no books, save for a single, heavily annotated Bible. There were no radios, no calendars, no connection to the outside world. There was only the word of Leland Blackwood, the Patriarch, the prophet, the jailer of his own family. With Leland Blackwood in custody, an analysis of his past became the key to understanding the present horror. Who was this man? Official records painted a sparse but telling picture. Leland had served briefly in the Canadian Armed Forces, where he excelled at survival training, but was discharged for insubordination, and what his superiors called unstable ideological fixations. After his discharge, he fell in with anti-government and survivalist movements, his rhetoric growing increasingly paranoid. He spoke of an impending societal collapse, a great cleansing that would sweep away the modern corrupt world. He saw himself as a prophet, a Noah building an ark in the wilderness to save his family from the coming flood. The last official record of Leland Blackwood was from nearly 30 years prior, when he married a young woman named Elara. Shortly after the birth of their first child, the couple vanished. They simply stepped away from society, ceasing to exist. In interrogations, Leland was uncooperative. He was arrogant, viewing the police and psychologists with a mixture of pity and contempt. He did not see his family as victims. He saw them as his flock, the only pure souls left on earth, whom he had protected from a world he despised. His entire identity was built on this delusion of being a savior, a patriarch ruling his own private Eden. The evidence, however, pointed not to a paradise, but to a meticulously crafted psychological and physical prison. The question of how one man could maintain such absolute dominion over 6 other people for nearly 3 decades goes far beyond the fence and the remote location. Leland Blackwood's control wasn't built primarily with logs and nails, but with fear, dependency, and a complete re-engineering of reality. For the Blackwood children, the outside world didn't exist as we know it. It was a concept, a terrifying fable told by their father, a place of soulless monsters, the others, who would snatch them away if they ever left the sanctuary. This was the bedrock of their dependence. He was the sole source of information, food, and safety, the god of their tiny, isolated universe. This psychological manipulation is a known phenomenon, often seen in cults and long-term hostage situations. By cutting off all ties to the outside world, Leland created a closed loop of logic from which there was no escape. Punishments for minor infractions were severe, designed to reinforce his divine authority. This brings us to the most disturbing question, the role of his wife, Elara. She was not born into this reality like her children. She remembered the outside world. Was she merely a victim, broken and brainwashed? Or, over the course of 30 years, had she become something more? The ambiguity of Elara Blackwood's role is perhaps the most frightening aspect of this case. Victim or accomplice? On one hand, the argument for her being a victim is compelling. She was barely an adult when Leland took her away from society. She displayed the same signs of abuse and malnutrition as her children. In her initial interviews, she was withdrawn, terrified, and exhibited clear signs of what is known as battered woman syndrome. Any obedience on her part could have been a survival mechanism, a calculated necessity to protect herself, and perhaps even to subtly shield her children from their father's wrath. However, a more disturbing theory emerged from the fragmented testimonies of the older children. They spoke of their mother not just as a fellow captive, but as an enforcer. They recounted instances where it was she, not Leland, who administered the punishments. They described her as the one who reinforced their father's twisted theology, telling them stories about the evil others with a conviction that seemed genuine. Was this an extreme form of Stockholm Syndrome? Or had she found a position of relative power within the grim hierarchy of the compound and clung to it? Journals, apparently written by her, were filled with a bizarre mix of passionate devotion to Leland and paranoid delusions that mirrored his own. The rescue of the Blackwood children marked the end of their captivity, but the beginning of a new and profoundly difficult journey. The scars of their isolation ran deep. When they were brought into the modern world, they were, in a very real sense, aliens on their own planet. The idea of a supermarket, with its overwhelming abundance of food, was terrifying. The sound of a car, the flicker of a television screen, the simple act of meeting a stranger's gaze, all were a sensory overload that could trigger panic. Their psychological recovery was an even more complex process. Therapists had to carefully deconstruct an entire worldview built on fear and lies. They had to learn that the world was not the evil place their father had described, and that they had individual identities. This was especially difficult for the older children and for Elara. The freedom they were given was, in itself, a source of profound anxiety. After a lifetime of having every moment dictated, the simple act of making a choice, what to wear, what to eat, could be paralyzing. Despite the arrests and the rescue, the Blackwood case remains full of unanswered questions. Leland Blackwood himself is the greatest limitation to our knowledge. Shortly after being taken into custody, before a full psychiatric evaluation could be completed or a trial could begin, he took his own life in his cell. He left no note, no confession, no explanation. He took his motivations and the full story of his 30-year reign to the grave. The night of Lyra's escape is also shrouded in mystery. She could only recall a chaotic argument, more violent than usual, that created a rare moment of distraction. Had her mother, Elara, finally reached a breaking point, creating the diversion that allowed her daughter to flee? Elara's own testimony on the matter has been inconsistent, leaving the truth of that crucial moment uncertain. These gaps in the story remind us that in real-life cases, unlike in fiction, we don't always get all the answers. Sometimes the darkness keeps its secrets. The legacy of the Leland Blackwood case is a chilling reminder that the vast, empty spaces on our maps can hide unimaginable horrors. The story confirms a terrifying possibility that a person can simply step outside of society, create their own set of laws, and become the absolute monarch of their own dark kingdom, completely undetected. The journey of the Blackwood children is ultimately a testament to the incredible resilience of the human spirit to endure, adapt, and seek the light, even after a lifetime spent in darkness. The most complex question is the role of Elara, the mother. Victim or accomplice? Leave your theory in the comments. If you enjoy analyses that explore these complex cases, subscribe so you don't miss our next investigation.